Wake up at 5, 6, 7 or 8.
I wake up about 11 or 12.
I wake up at about 8 and then I listen to East Leeds Community Radio.
So hello to our radio audience around the world. You're listening in to Chapel FM Radio as part of Leeds Lit Fest 2026. And this is the third event of a day, and one of the final events of the whole 9-day festival. There are one or two events happening later in town that we may hear about in a moment. But this is a conversation about the graphic novel Gigs. But before we get into that conversation, I'm going to hand the microphone over to the person who makes this whole literature festival happen, certainly the visionary behind it. So Fiona, take it away.
Thanks, Tony. Well, a visionary. Thank you very much indeed. Just a bit of a grafter, really. So good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Leeds Lit Fest 2026. My name is Fiona, and I'm one of the directors of Leeds Lit Fest. We're here today at the wonderful Chapel FM Arts Centre to celebrate the launch of Gigs, How to Make a Worryingly Prescient Graphic Novel by illustrator Cy Smith and writer Mark Mosedale. Woo! So, as Tony has already said, we're on day 9 of Leeds Lit Fest 2026. This is our 53rd event out of 54. I am tired, but it's been amazing. And so thank you for creating this wonderful atmosphere and audience for Cy and Mark as well. It's fitting that we close our festival with a celebration of one of the most exciting intersections of literature and visual storytelling, the graphic novel. And in many ways, this event brings the festival full circle as we open the festival with a graphic novel event with Myth Tristram and the Rickard sisters, and now we are closing it with Gigs. So Cy Smith, who for the people in the audience is sat on the left of the table as I am looking at him, is an acclaimed illustrator, graphic novelist and educator whose work is known for its striking visual style and deep connection to northern communities and culture. And the audience will see representations of that on the screen behind them. Sat next to him in the middle is Mark Mosedale, writer, musician and creative producer, whose work often, have I got that wrong? No, writer, sorry, often explores, creative writing and graphic novels. We shall move on from that one. Guiding the conversation today is Tony Macaluso, director of Chapel FM Arts Centre, a long-time champion of creativity, community arts and storytelling in East Leeds, but Leeds in general, and someone who's been a valued supporter of Leeds Lit Fest over many years. So thank you, Tony, and the gang here. So thank you, all of you, for joining us today in the closing stretch of Leeds Lit Fest. And please join me in giving a very warm Leeds Lit Fest welcome and Chapel FM welcome to Mark Mosedale, Cy Smith, and Tony Macaluso. Let's go.
So before we sit down with Mark and Cy and start the conversation, in the second half of the program, we're going to open it up so anybody in the room can ask questions and have discussions. So we'll have this roving microphone going around. So be keeping in mind, thinking of questions you might want to ask them about this book and the themes and topics brought up in it. But before I sit down, I just wanted to get a quick sense just from the people in the room. How many of you out there have worked what you might consider a gig job, where you've been doing kind of gig work, whatever that might mean, and we'll get into what that means. I'm just curious to get a sense. Is there many folks out there? Okay, a few people out there, a few around the room, it's kind of a scattering and stuff like that. And just quickly, I'm just curious, what has that consisted of for a few people? Just shout it out, even though I'll repeat it in the microphone. Like, what's your gig work? Okay.
Doing sort of, exhibition invigilation and that kind of thing.
Okay, Henry Moore. How about anyone, just a few others, just to get a little sense of what we mean by gig work that people have done? Or maybe someone you know, a loved one that has done a bit of gig work. Anyone else? Got a gig work in there? Freelance copywriter? Okay, good. All right. Well, we're going to get a sense as we go along about some of the possible gig work that perhaps awaits us and the future generations as we go along. So, but please share your gig experiences or gig concerns for the future. So I'm going to take a seat now with Mark and Cy, and we're going to dive into the book. All right, so, we on, Elliot? Good? Yes, all right. So, Cy, Mark, welcome to Chapel FM Radio. So and
Hi.
here we are.
Hello, thank you for having us.
So this book, just coming out. In fact, it's coming out to the world on Tuesday. Is that correct?
Tuesday, yeah,
in
we
48
do have
hours.
a few copies that we
So there
are
are a few
allowed to
copies
sell.
here.
I was
So,
gonna sell anyway
And
today.
this masterpiece, which I've read a couple times now, and find really prescient and frightening as well, but also joyous and aesthetically just really, really magnificent. Take us back to the origin stories. I think this goes back to right around pandemic time. Is that right? When this whole thing kind of kicked off?
It predates the pandemic a little bit. Me and Si were just debating the actual timeline of it, and when we got going. So Si thinks he knows it better than me.
Yeah, I do know it better than you. I mean, it's quite a long story, but basically I'd been making graphic novels with Leeds Church Institute for a bit, and I reached the point where I felt like I'd reached the limit that I could get to with my writing. And I knew I needed to find a writer. Me and Mark were part of the same comic book group. So I emailed you to say, do you fancy doing something? And you said yes. And so in March 2019, definitely March 2019, we met up. I had some ideas I thought were amazing. I pitched them to you. You pitched your ideas to me, and I said, let's do yours. And so March 2019 is when we first met to start talking about it.
Okay, so a little over 7 years ago. And in the initial vision, was there a catalyst, something that really kind of got it all going for you both?
It was sort of an attempt for me to find the bit in the middle of the Venn diagram of mine and Si's interests, because my reading habits as far as comics go do lean more towards a sort of floppy monthly kind of action-y. I used to read a lot of superhero comics. I still read a fair few and that kind of thing. Whereas Si likes sort of more art-focused, indie type stuff. And I was kind of like, where do our interests cross? Like, what can I get him to draw that I think he might not hate? And so I don't remember what exactly sort of made me land on the pitch of kind of AI and universal basic income and gig work. It just sort of felt a little bit ambient at the time in a way that it's become far less ambient and far more concrete.
Yeah, well, over these 7 years since the idea got started, so much has happened in that world at such a breakneck pace. Yeah, and we should say for listeners and people in the studio who haven't gotten a chance to browse through the book, I mean, it jumps through it travels through a dystopian future, but it also takes us to outer space, to refugee boat at sea, to a 100-mile run across the north. It moves around in space in some really powerful and ways that graphic novels, I think, do particularly well. Kind of take you to different places and jumping around in space.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, the basic pitch is... Actually, you do the basic pitch, because
Okay,
you can
let's
do
do the
I do
basic
the
pitch.
pictures.
You'd think I'd have nailed this by now, but I haven't. But it's set in a post-AI future where a lot of the jobs have been eradicated, and everyone's stuck earning universal basic income by working crappy gigs through an app. And we tell a story about an octogenarian punk who's stuck in a care home. We've got a drug runner who takes a very strange gig. We've got a street artist who paints murals by day and is forced by the app to paint over them by night, and some other things that I hope people will discover as they get into it. But the stories all sort of weave together to what we hope is quite a satisfying ending.
Mm. And one of the threads that runs through it is how art, and in particular music, I'd say, or also visual arts, sort of exists as a kind of counter, as a space of possible rebellion or escape or resistance to this. And let's maybe start a bit with the role of music in all this. We were talking a bit beforehand about maybe some of the kinds of music that weaves through the book, and so how it plays into it.
Well, you're a musician now. So
Yeah, now that you've been dubbed a musician, in fact, you can give us a tune.
yeah.
at
Well,
the end.
I mean, I think for me, growing up, I grew up before the internet and Spotify and those kind of things. So for me, growing up, like, music was a really important thing to show which tribe you belong to.
Yeah.
And your identity was very much formed by the music that you liked and the band T-shirt that you wore and what you Tippexed on your school bag and all those sort of things. So, and there's the octogenarian punk character in the care home, because it's set in the future, she's very much my kind of generation. So she carries this idea of your identity in the music and the idea that kind of another world is possible, that is held when you find that song by that band, that just suddenly you go, you know, wow, there's this whole sort of other world that I couldn't have imagined out there.
And Sid, the octogenarian, is working with Ivy, right? Who's a younger woman, and she sort of sends her off on these little musical pursuits.
Yeah, she sort of mentors her in a.
Yeah.
It's almost malicious at some points, the way she takes her on board and tries to mould her. But yeah, so she's got this big thing about punk and the liberation of punk and that idea, that sort of DIY thing.
Yeah.
And that then runs through the rest of the book. So,
and just for people out in the audience and listeners, it's a good excuse to name drop some of the bands that she's into. Do you want to mention a couple of the band names for people that maybe know these bands or maybe not? So maybe a few people can go home and discover them.
Yeah, the Slits are quite big in it, and X-Ray Specs are in it as well. And she goes on. Sid sends Ivy off on this kind of voyage of discovery. So she tries the Sex Pistols. Doesn't like them much. Fair enough.
Yeah.
And
they have some good debates though about
yeah. And it was a bit hard for me because there's a derogatory reference to Radiohead in it that it hurt me to include, but it is in character, so it's fair enough.
Yeah.
So
I'm about 20 years younger than Si. It's quite fitting that I. Sorry.
Sorry.
It's quite fitting that I did sort of lean on him quite a lot for those musical references. I have, since I was 20, I seem to have always had friends who were 20 years older than me, and I would play something, and they would go, oh yeah, that's just like blah, 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 from 20 years ago. And I go, oh, okay, thanks, yeah, cool. And it's fascinating and sometimes infuriating, and that sort of relationship was very much kind of based on those relationships, you know, multiple people that I've been friends with over the years. It was just when we sort of spotted, you know, octogenarian, 20 years in the future, like, perfect, that's sort of just the right age gap.
Yeah, there was a moment though, so my record player broke for years, and I got a new one while we were doing this, and I was great, I can get my record collection out and play all these amazing records. My record collection is not as great as I was making out. I'm trying to say there's some stuff in it that I was going, if you'd seen it, Anyway, it's not as good. But I think that's also part of what's in the book with the character of Sid, because you're never quite sure how much she's glorifying and sort of, you know, reinventing her history with music and just her history generally.
Yeah. Well, she has a bit of a dark secret, which we may or may not reveal here. I'll leave that to you guys if you want to.
And she's not the most reliable witness.
Yeah.
And I think that's there in music as well. You know, you use it as you get older. You use it to sort of create this version of who you were. And maybe I wasn't that cool actually.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, along with music, another really key part of the book is the idea of cities and urban spaces and how they're presented in the book. And in a bit, we're going to show people in the studio, at least, some of the drawings and the kind of the evolution from drawings into the finished versions. But cities in general, because a significant part of the book, when you're not in outer space or the sea or running across the moors and the fells, is in this really wonderfully detailedly rendered urban space, you know, with new elements. Of course, lots of drones, swarms of drones flying around everywhere, but also, we sort of see how the city this urban space has evolved. And were there certain inspirations for you both in terms of like your interest in urban spaces, architecture, sort of how you went about presenting that vision of the urban future?
Si certainly got a big one, but I'll let him get to that in a second. We did start with this idea that everyone on the basic income would be living at ground level. Yeah. And it would be dirty and filthy and covered in graffiti. And that higher up, you know, the people with money lived, and it was lighter and airy. And if you look at some of the illustrations, the upper levels look kind of like that utopian sort of tree-covered vision of that we were sold of what cities would look like in the future, you know, in those books you'd get in the 1970s and so on. And it, as a sort of plot element, it kind of fell by the wayside. We did sort of realise that it just numerically wouldn't work if you put all the rich people in the space and everyone else was sort of stuck on it. Just on a practical level wouldn't work, but you can still sort of see it in the book. And you know, there was quite a big influence on you, wasn't there, Si, when it came to designing all that?
Yeah, so there's a speculative architect called Liam Young.
We just both learned that term, speculative architect.
Yeah. But we're using it all the time.
Yeah.
So he's a speculative architect.
I think you might be a speculative architect, actually.
Well, yeah. I think anyone can. Anyway, so his work was quite important. I looked at a lot of his stuff early on. He's really worth investigating because he makes films. He doesn't make buildings. He's an architect that doesn't do buildings, but he does environments. He does world building. He makes movies. He's done some really interesting things with. He'll like take an iPhone and reduce it to all its different elements, and then he'll go and visit the places where they come from and see how it arrives where we are. So yeah, he's interesting. He was quite important. But I think the city is like a character in the book, and I think we both wanted it to feel quite dense and solid. So when there's lots of graffiti in it, and whenever I drew the graffiti, I did like 4 different. It's all done in Photoshop, and so there's 4 different layers of graffiti at different transparencies, and it.
This is one of the reasons it's been 7 years in the making.
Yeah, you can't read most of it, but it's there, and knowing that it's there. So and then within that, so like the all of the members of our comic book group are represented in the graffiti in various places.
Oh, okay.
So there's lots of little Easter eggy things that are in it as well. So yeah, I went to town a bit, didn't I? Sorry. But there's like algae curtains as well, which I researched and found out about algae curtains, which are a way of, in the future, of possibly powering things. So it's like big hanging polystyrene things full of algae, and it heats up, and then Anyway, so I went mad basically on the research. It's a great opportunity to mess about. And,
Well, Liam Young, speculative architect, sounds like a good shout out. For all of you speculative architects out there listening in. Well, on that, it's a good segue then into looking at the sketches. So Elliot's going to bring up the sketch PowerPoint, so we're going to be able to see. And for our radio listeners out there, we'll do a little bit of descriptiveness as well, which is a good chance to sort of tell us what we're seeing here. So we're going to look at the process and how things evolved along from the drawing stage into the finished product stage. So coming up in just a moment here. So, and is this, so this sort of way of over here there? Okay, so tell us what we've got here in front of us.
Okay, so that's kind of a sample pile of sketchbooks, and then some of the drawings that I was making for the pages. So I work in a very messy way. Which is another reason why it took 7 years. A lot of the book was drawn in pencil and then scanned into the computer, and then I draw over the top of the pencil to sort of digitize it. So what you've got there is a big pile of bits of drawings from various pages that were all kind of scanned and then composited. It would be much easier if I just drew a page and scanned it, but I'm just not capable of doing that really. So, and then on the left-hand side is just a load of sketchbooks and notebooks, and there was just hundreds of those where I'd be drawing. Sometimes I'd be watching the telly and drawing drones and buildings and characters and things. So, yeah.
And Mark, were you being looped in at this stage, or was this happening and then kind of came to you as they reached a more finished stage?
We have a Slack channel that Slack are threatening to delete because it contains like thousands and thousands and thousands of messages. It was a very intense collaboration at times. And Si would sort of send me sketches and drawings, and I would go, yeah, okay, cool. Let me know when you've got some finished art.
Well, in some ways, this really tactile, having the notebook, sketching by hand. I mean, it also links up with the wider theme of the book, right? I mean, this way of working and thinking and just making sense of the world, observing the world through muscles and sensory connections. Okay, I think we have a next slide coming up in this series.
Yeah, so that's just another pile of sketchbooks. Honestly, I have so many of these. It's like your holiday slides in here. It's my sketchbook.
Yeah.
Some of them are held together with tape because they just, So Elliot, if you just keep going through, I'll just talk to him. Okay, so what I will be doing though in the sketchbooks is trying to design the characters as well. So there's some work in the sketchbooks that is just slightly aimless, ambient, just drawing drones that will then crop up ideas for buildings. But then, so this sequence shows there's a character who's a librarian in it. She's like a guerrilla librarian. And this is me trying to work out what she's going to look like. So
okay, so these are all different variations of the guerrilla librarian.
Just me, and again, Elliot, if we just keep going through. Yeah, so there's pages and pages of these, of me just going through, trying different things out. Did you see these, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, Si would send these through and say, what do you think about this, Vern? And there'd be like, maybe his 8 favourite of the designs. And I would go, oh, this one's really good, but what about maybe this element? And we'd sort of process that together.
So there she is.
That's the finished librarian there. That's what she came out like.
As she evolved.
And then, so this is like me drawing in front of the telly, because there's some sequences in clubs where there's people dancing. And I just knew that I just needed to have some drawings of people just dancing around. So, yeah, that's me sat, I think, watching The Men Who Stared at Goats, which is not a great film, which is probably why the drawings are so good. But yeah, so there's pages of these. But then when you see the finished thing, you can go back and you can find some of these drawings buried
individual
in
people,
the artwork. So so there's some of that. I think that's the first scene where you see a big crowd dancing, and quite a few of those poses, come through in there. So there's a lot of ambient, just drawing and just going through stuff that then finds its way in. So, and again, it's not very efficient. I am very inefficient. Yeah. So more drawings.
I would say, having ribbed Si for the amount of layers he put on his graffiti, like this amount of inefficiency is one of the things that makes the book good. It's there's so much kind of texture and weight to it, and a big part of that is the amount of time and iteration that's gone into it, and layer upon layer of stuff sort of accruing and accruing and accruing. So I can rib Si all day long for his laboured process, but it really shows up in the work, I think.
Yeah.
And Mark, your dialogue, I mean, the wider story, but then the dialogue in particular, I mean, it's really crisp, it's funny, the characters have really distinct voices. Were there certain, writers or people that kind of, you felt like fed into that, your approach to kind of how you wanted these characters to talk, or what were any inspirations on that side of things? Just the tone of voice.
Yeah, on the comics front, there's a writer called Brian Michael Bendis, who's actually a big superhero writer and crime comics writer as well. There's definitely some of his rhythm in there. When that first sort of came into superhero comics in particular, that was like, what's this? This was not how comics characters used to talk. Like, comics dialogue is not real dialogue, but it has to seem like real dialogue on the page, which is sort of the trick. But also, I was rewatching The Office, the American Office, for about the 8th time the other day, and I was like, oh, am I allowed to swear?
Yeah.
Oh, shit.
And why the American version, not the British version? Any particular reason you were drawn to that?
It's just because it's kinder, I think. Like, I can't...
Yeah.
I've got a limited stomach for any long-form entertainment that's not, in some sense, kind of kind and warm. And even though this gig is quite bleak, I think there is a warmth at the heart of it that I hope comes through. Anyway, and the way they sort of pace the characters in the American Office, the sort of pauses, the mumbles, the way people are funny and witty, but not too funny and witty. Not. It doesn't feel. It never feels overly. Well, it probably does feel a little overly written sometimes, but it always feels quite natural, and that's something I always strive for in dialogue.
Yeah, there's lots of good sort of really good dramatic pauses, thinking pauses, little moments of silence between the characters, which is interesting. It's hard to do in a graphic novel, but they work.
Yeah, it's an interesting one to figure out, is that, and part of it comes from collaborating with Cy and us kind of finding each other's rhythm as we went. But part of it's just instinct as well. You just sort of have to develop a feel for it. You can't think your way into the rhythm of dialogue and panels. It comes from having read way too many of them, really.
Yes. Well, we're going to open it up for questions pretty soon because we've got a nice, packed, eager audience, and I can imagine there's going to be some good probing questions out there. But before that, just a final question from me, and I might throw in a few more as part of the wider question. Just as this thing, so in 48 hours or so, give or take, on Tuesday, this is going to go out into the world, and people will start discovering it. And what are the two of you in your kind of your wildest dreams, your secret hopes? What do you imagine for the voyage of this book as it comes to life and starts traveling around the world?
Yeah, fame, fortune, glory, Hollywood.
I imagine in a couple of weeks I'll be the voice of a couple of generations.
Yes.
I can't. I find that a really hard thing to answer because I just think you make it and it goes out and then it does what it does.
Yeah.
And
I've just always wanted to make a book. Honestly, it existing, is kind of enough. We've had some quite really positive reviews so far. We got a starred review from Publishers Weekly, and we got some really great quotes from some writers that I admire. And if that's it, that's probably enough, really.
Yeah.
Obviously.
I was going to say, but we also all the way through we were going. This might be the only book that we ever get to publish. So I think we treated it, certainly early part, we treated it like this is our one shot at this, which is another reason why it took so long, because it was like, we've got to really nail it and do it well. That's why it ended up being 270 pages, didn't it? Because I kept saying, well, we could have another spread in there. It was just,
Yeah. At one point, I pitched to cut one of the stories because I was like, this is just taking too long. and Side sort of pushed back, and we didn't, and I'm very glad, because I am very proud of it, and it feels weighty and like a real thing. Has anyone read Stoner? I can't remember the name of the author. There's a bit in it where he's dying, and he's written a novel. He's this sort of literary professor in the 1950s in America, and it takes you through his death, and it's very sort of moving, and there's a point at which he thinks, my book, and I'm like, I absent-mindedly imagine dying sometimes and thinking of, and I'm like, if this is the only one, this will do,
Yeah.
I'm pretty happy with it.
Well, I've no doubt you'll be, riding the bus, whatever, and seeing some kid reading their graphic novel or other things, and just, again, the fact that it will go out there, and who knows who will discover it. So, all right, well, we're gonna open it up to the audience. We've got some more images we'll show as well, but let's open it up for a little while first. So I've got a roving microphone, so I'm going to be able to travel around the room and come to where you are and ask away. This is your chance to ask Mark and Cy questions. So I think I've got a hand up there, so I'm going to head off on my journey. A few more.
Hi, I'm Richard. Question for Cy first. Just such a prolific amount of art, and I know from knowing you that's something you're able to do, but were there some times when that motivation was waning? And
No.
So what kept you going then? In just passionate about the whole thing, or
I just don't. I wouldn't know how to stop. I don't know. I get up and do it. Do you know what I mean? So I didn't. It was more the thought that I'd never finish that was the problem than motivating myself to do it. I mean, I think there's a sense of responsibility as well, because I think if it was my thing, and if it was just me, I'd be able to cut corners with it or do something. But I think there's a sort of, it's got both of our names on it, so. There's a sense in which, I've dragged you into this, so I've got to get us out of it. I've got to finish it. So, yeah. But, there were a lot. I mean, when we pitched it, so Mark pitched me the idea. We had a conversation about it. I did some preliminary drawings and things, and then went off Googling speculative architects and all that. And I can remember. Mark wrote the first script, which was like 8 pages that we were going to design. We were going to draw the pages, send them to a publisher. And when I'd finished with it, it was 24 pages. And that kind of is. We've got better at that, but I've still been going back and saying this can have a spread. So that's another week, because each page is like 3 days. So spread is like another week. So I was adding stuff in. So I have the opposite problem of motivation is not a problem. That's.
All right, I believe we got a couple questions back here. We'll make our way through.
Thank you. Hello. So I just wanted to ask, because you said the novel was about 7 years in the making. So obviously stuff's been happening in the world in the last 7 years. And I've just been wondering, as you were talking, to what extent did you sort of see world developments affecting your, either the story or the look of the world, maybe, that you were sort of working on in real time?
Ooh, so I kept looking at this concept and thinking, I hope the moment doesn't come and go whilst we're making it. And and the headlines keep rolling in, and I think, well, this is terrible for the world and really good for sales. And I would rather it be the other way around. I'm not sure how much I felt it sort of working its way in, though, because a lot of the stuff which looks alarmingly sort of current or prescient was sort of in there from the start, wasn't it? So, but that said, I think from my point of view, we've talked about size process being quite layered and textured and iterative, but for me, being able to take so long to write it, it wasn't an advisable way of doing things. Like, I should have written the whole thing and then handed it off, and then 4 years later we would have had a book. But I was writing as I was drawing it, and being able to sort of absorb things as I went and kind of feed them in. And it wasn't necessarily the headlines of the day, but things like some of the conversations about music were the product of things I was just stumbling across as we went. And I'm sure, like that, we've got a space station in there, which is less science fictional than it probably sounds. And I'm sure some of that was coming out of the stories that were coming up about private, all these billionaires with their big dick-shaped toys. I'm sure there was some of that in there, and
there were a few things that we had in it as well. So we had, like, Twitter was in it, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And then suddenly, like, oh, wait a minute, Twitter isn't Twitter anymore. So we had to go back and change that. And then I can remember going back in and adding lots of face masks in at one point.
Yeah, there was
suddenly like, oh, okay, that's the world we're in now.
Yeah,
So
we added in some stuff about there's an R number, but it's not COVID. It was American flu.
American flu, yeah.
American flu.
Yeah. So there was a bit of going back and retrofitting things in, wasn't there? But
Yeah.
the main thrust of it was,
Yeah.
Okay, I think we had a question back here. Yep.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Helen. I wondered about the title, at what point the title came to the fore, and was the fantastic triple meaning deliberate? I haven't read the book, but I'm already there with gigabytes, gig economy, and music gigs. So
yeah.
This is embarrassing.
please tell me that was all deliberate.
Yeah, this is embarrassing. It wasn't called Gigs for a long time. It was called Basics, and then our editor, Chris, our lovely editor at Top Shelf, kind of said, you need to call it Gigs. I think we were,
okay.
Yeah. But I mean, we'd been working on it for a long time, hadn't we? And I suddenly went to you, I said to you, like 3 or 4 years in, oh, it's funny that, isn't it? Because I'm drawing people at gigs, and it's called Gigs, and you were a bit like, yeah. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's some glasses in there, some augmented reality glasses. They're gigs.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Very good. Over here.
So I guess my question is about the whole publication process. You have a few books under your belt, and I'm wondering, how do you deal with that kind of publication anticlimax? It's like the book is done, now what? There's kind of like the high and then the low. How do you deal with that low part?
I haven't had the high yet. I've had a few people going, you must be really excited, and I'm like, I'm just nervous and anxious, and you know.
Yeah, I mean, this is actually my first book. It's my first comic, really. The first pages of a comic anyone ever drew that I had written were the pitch pages for this, which turned into a 270-page graphic novel, which is not a great way to learn. So I don't know either. I'm trying to prepare myself for it, though. We've made plans for lunch on Tuesday when it comes out, because I'm like, I'm going to wake up, we're going to wake up and I'm going to be like, my book's out, and nothing, you know, like nothing will happen. You know, we've had some reviews already. I'm not expecting any to sort of rush in. I don't imagine like the internet's going to light up. We could go to OK Comics to look at some stacks of them, but they've had them on display for several weeks, and they will be busy dealing with their weekly order, and will probably not be too grateful for me inside lurking around gawping at piles of our books. So I was like, let's go for lunch so that something happens, you know.
Just a question really on your publisher. So how easy or difficult was it to be published as your first graphic novel? Do you want to say a little bit about that?
Yeah, shall I? Okay, so I said at the start I'd been making these comics for Leeds Church Institute, when I made the first one, which was How to Disappear Completely, I sent a few copies off just to publishers that I liked and whose books I'd enjoyed before. I mean, it's slightly embarrassing now, with slightly sort of fanboy, like, oh, I really like your comics, here's mine, you know, sort of thing. Anyway, so I sent these off, and the only person that replied was Chris Staros from Top Shelf, and he just said, I really like it, I think it's great, it's not the sort of thing that we'd ever publish, but keep going, and if you've got anything in the future, send it to me. So we tried one British publisher with our first pitch and didn't hear anything from them. So then we went, right, we'll send it to Chris at Top Shelf. Mark came up with a devious plan, which he well, you go on.
Well, we worked out exactly
I
worked out. I was like, the exact right moment to hit someone's inbox is 10 a.m. on a Tuesday. Not Monday, because they're catching up from the weekend, they're coming back up to full speed. Not 9 a.m, because who knows what's coming overnight. 10 a.m. on a Monday. Chris Staros lives in Georgia? I was going to say one of the Carolinas.
Anyway, yeah.
Georgia, I think he's right. Georgia in America. So we looked at the time difference and we were like, right, okay, 3 p.m. in the afternoon, local time, we'll send it. And it'll hit him at 10 a.m. And we, having sent it to the previous publisher and heard absolutely nothing.
And followed up as well.
And
said,
followed up.
Did you get it? And then nothing.
Nothing. I foolishly still was like, oh, what's going to happen? But I didn't check my email. And then Si texted me at 6 minutes past 3 in the afternoon and said, have you seen your email? I was like, what?
It was about 20 minutes, wasn't it?
It was 6 minutes, I remember.
Yeah. It was quick anyway. He went, yeah, I'll print it.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, okay.
Yeah. And then he said, how much advance do you need? And we were like, oh.
Yeah.
So spent several days emailing everyone we could think of, which was not that many people, to try and find out how much we should ask for as an advance. I do have a bit of a theory about comics publishing versus prose publishing, in that I do sort of think if you've got something, if it's good, I think it might be easier to get it through the door of a graphic novel publisher or a comics publisher, because the barrier to entry is so much higher. Like, to draw 8 or, in our case, 24 pages of a comic to send to someone, that's like really hard, whereas anyone can bash out a chapter, or not anyone, sorry, that's not fair, but you know, a lot of people can bash out a chapter or two of a novel and convince themselves it's good enough to sort of send in, and it's, you know, it takes a while to read that, and for an editor or a sub-editor or whoever it is has to go through the slush pile to work out whether it's good or not. So I think the barrier of getting your sort of pages together is higher for comics, but then once you've done that, if you've got something, then I think it probably is easier to get it picked up. I mean,
so what you're saying is that writing is easy and drawing's hard.
Yes, I'd stand by that, yeah. I don't know what's wrong with you. Why do you do it?
Okay, we have another question from the back here.
Hi. it's quite a bleak book, but there are really moments of great hope in it, and I think that comes through in the colour. So you get scenes, running through the dark alleyways, space. They're all dark, but then the kind of colour wash starts coming through. So the scenes in the club, you start to see this red wash, but there are also little moments of brightness. So there's a red and yellow scarf for the person doing graffiti. Why is that standing out? And there's a moment of these beautiful, actually, I love it, there's these Wolves trainers, which are trainers made in Bolton. Why is that coming through, this blue and yellow? Why is the brightness coming through in the colour, and what does that mean?
Good question. Well, the red and yellow scarves, because that's in the dark a lot, it's actually quite hard to see, so it's just a nice way of picking that character out, and he does a lot of running, so having something flailing behind him is a little artistic way of showing that he's moving. But it's also a Roy the Rovers, Melchester Rovers Easter egg, because it's the red and yellow scarves. Did you know that? No. Okay. So yeah. So I'll put that in there. I mean, it's hard for me to remember all the reasons that I made the colour choices that I made, but we definitely wanted each venue, each location to have its own kind of colour palette. So the club is very sort of vibrant red. They go to a rave a bit later on. There's a bit spoilery that in it. But anyway, they go to a rave, and that's a slightly murkier red, because I'm not massive on rave music. But, it's a bit more gritty. The care home is very lilac-y and pink. So we were trying to pick those colours. And, I mean, those Walshy trainers, they are really lovely, aren't they? So, it's like, if you find something like that, you kind of want to run with it a bit. But yeah.
So we'll leave some time for 2 or 3 more questions before we wrap up. But I want to just go back to a few more images, because I think we have a second little collection of slides, and I think this is the one that's the kind of the construction of the book. Is that right? Let's see. There it is. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's take a look at these and then bring it back to questions. So describe to us, especially for
Yeah. So this is. I said that the pages are made in Photoshop. So that's like the pencil drawing that I scanned in, and then as we go through, you'll just see. So I put a colour. So there's a sort of block of red colour because that page is basically red. You can just see the pencil there. So that's the pencil layer over the top, which I've taken the transparency down so that I can draw the lines over it, and then it just builds up in layers over the top. This makes it look really organised and orderly. Actually, I'm doing a bit in one layer and then going back and doing a bit in a layer underneath, and then the colour gets blocked in underneath. So the line sits on top, and then all the colours are going in underneath. And there's sort of transparent layer or semi-transparent layers in the brickwork, and so it just builds up. And it's just nice to see it because it does make me look really efficient, and it makes me look like I really planned it all. And it doesn't show. There will have been lots of things that got put in there and then rubbed out and then have gone back. But yeah, so that's how the pages are sort of.
But again, seeing that layering, when you think then about the reality of the world we're living in, where again AI can create images like that, right? But all the micro choices, the tiny little observations and details and thoughts that go into that, again, is what gives it a kind of richness and energy and subtlety, and as you say, the Easter eggs that are hidden in there as well. Yeah. So I think that's really useful to get to see that.
Well, it makes it human, doesn't it?
Yes. Yeah. So we have a chance, if there are a couple more questions out there, got a show of hands. Okay, we'll do maybe 3 or 4 more questions, and then we'll carry on the conversation downstairs as books are being signed and sold as well.
Hi, thanks. It sounded like you kind of got into comics and graphic novels in kind of different ways, and I was wondering if you could share a bit about what sort of made you want to create graphic novels, and maybe share some of your inspirations or graphic novels that inspired you.
They got into me just really early. I can't exactly remember. It was British kind of reprints of American superhero comics, and I think they sort of sit at the kind of intersection of literature and sort of visual entertainment in kind of just the right spot. You know, a film can be sort of more visually exciting than a comic sometimes, but you don't get the same sort of creative leeway making a film with a studio and lots of money behind you as you do with comics. So you get that sort of dynamism and that excitement that you get from the visual component of storytelling, but you can get really weird, I think, and you can do odd things and make strange choices and interesting choices in a way that no other medium sort of allows you to do. I mean, you can do the same in prose, and I love prose, but it's never quite as exciting as a really good comic, I don't think.
Mm. And you worked at OK Comics, didn't you, as well?
Yeah.
So.
Worked there for a good few years, and it really sort of informed my, kind of some kind of subconscious layer that's swimming around back there of what I like and what I think is good. And so I've just consumed vast amounts of comics over the years. It's just swirling around in there.
And I grew up like reading the Beano and Roy the Rovers and comics, and then I trained as an illustrator. So at like 30 years working as a freelance illustrator, and in that time I've done quite a bit of comics work as jobs, but not for. I've made comics, but not for comics, if you see what I mean. So I've done a lot of kids' textbooks where there's little comic strips that do things in there. So it's been the sort of last 10 years I've been trying to pivot more into being a graphic novelist or a comics, whatever the word for what I am now is. That's what I've been trying to get into. So so that was my way into it. But I mean, like I said, I kind of reached the point where just doing it on my own wasn't really. The drawing side, the images were great. I was really happy with the great, but I was very happy with where I'd got to. But the writing was just, which was why I was, and I took a bit of a punt on Mark, I think, because I hadn't read any of his work, but I kind of knew that he'd be all right, and that he's really good. He's really good.
I mean, I'm at the risk of getting a bit gushy. I'm forever going to owe you for that, because I've been sort of wanting to do some comics for years, but finding an artist to work with, unless you're prepared to pay them, is very, very difficult. So when Si sort of showed up, I bit his hand off, and that's sort of why this exists. But I also think it has been interesting, because there are things in gigs that I just don't think you would have drawn if I hadn't sort of made you.
No, not at all.
We've got a sequence that's set in space. We've got a crime in a video game. We've got digital invisibility cloaks, which you hated.
Well, so Mark said this scene involves about 100 people and they're wearing digital invisibility cloaks. And I'm like, okay.
And that's all I had to write.
That was it.
That's about 30 seconds of my life, and this is sort of the result. And
but that is great, because you go, great. I've got to work out what a digital invisibility cloak looks. I mean, it's fun, So, but I wouldn't have come up with it myself, So, yeah. I mean, I also had a few people telling me, you need to collaborate. You need to collaborate, and so I was being sort of pushed in that direction by other people as well. But I mean, I think the good thing about comics is you can get into it at any level, because you can just make it, and now you can print it as a zine really cheaply, and you can sell it, and there is no real bar for entry, is there, in comics?
Well, there's drawing skill. You can make comics without me, and I can't make comics without you.
Oh yeah.
So we have two more questions from the back corner of the radio theater here.
Hi. With the paneling and the framing and the layout of the pages, how much of that is in the script or thought about when writing the script, and how much is in the hands of the artist?
Well, I don't put a lot of that in the script. The first story is quite heavily dominated by a 9-panel grid, and we did discuss it. I'm pretty sure it was Si's idea. I know some comics writers will sort of prescribe layouts and stuff, but unless I have a particularly strong idea of the best way what I think is the best way to do it, or just like a really strong vision of it in my head that I can't sort of get out of the way, I will just sort of leave it because, you know, it's his job. As far as I'm concerned, anyway.
I mean, there were some moments where he said, "Do it like this," and I didn't. That's fair, isn't it? And there's that one where the speech bubbles go down and the person's walking up.
Yeah.
There's a few that are, you know, kind of.
If you watch YouTube videos about how to make comics, it will very much be presented like a writer creates a script and it gets sent off, and a lot of teams don't ever really speak. You know, they just, the script gets sent and that's how it's done. But I definitely think it's hard to tell where the writing stops and the art starts. You know, it's all sort of becomes this sort of more amorphous storytelling thing, and it's quite fascinating to experience that from the inside, really, I would say.
But your scripts arrive, and I'm going to say really nice things about you now. But like the character, I was sort of reading the characters and knowing who they were straight away. It's like, oh yeah, that's that. You know, there wasn't a lot of. I didn't have to do a lot of work there, so I think, and then that starts to suggest things like the paneling and stuff like that. So you know, there's a sort of, and I think we got better as we worked our way through it, and you realised I was going to triple the amount of pages, so you started writing to that a bit more. And I realised maybe I had to tone it down a bit.
And every now and then I'd pin him down with a page turn that he couldn't sort of ignore. Because page turn, for people who don't know, is sort of the only place you get to surprise a reader. Because you know, the way you look at a comic is you open the page, and whether you want to or not, you're taking the whole thing in. So you can only surprise someone on a page turn. So if I tell Si, this is where we're going to surprise someone on a page turn, he's kind of stuck with it, you know. I sort of figured that out eventually. This is how I keep the page count down. Yeah.
So we've got a final question here.
Okay, so you've referred to lots of Easter eggs throughout the comic.
Yeah.
Sorry, book. Will you do some clues or reveals as to where they are so we don't miss out on them, all that hard work?
No.
Sorry.
Well, if you ask very politely, you might discover some of the Easter eggs. So, well, as we wrap it up, we're going to head downstairs to sell and sign some books in just a few minutes here. But before we go, just a final shout out. So, Mark Mosedale, Si Smith, is there anything you want to say that you haven't gotten to say yet? This is your chance to shout it out to the world over the radio about this process, your hopes for it. Any words of wisdom for budding writers and illustrators out there? Anything else?
Ooh. Well, I just think, again, that comics is very easily accessible. So if you are thinking of doing comics, then just, you know, do them, basically. You know, that would be my... There isn't a bar to entry, so that's my wisdom.
I'd say don't. No, Si is right, but he's also misrepresenting the amount of effort and skill he puts into this. But he is also right. You can just do it. You know, we've got some mini comics that we've created to sort of promote gigs, and you know, we have just, you know, we took 7 years to do this, and we took about a week and a half from me starting to type to Si finishing, and then another week to get them printed. And you know, we've got an 8-page comic. You know, you can do it. Yeah. Also, we're doing a launch event at OK Comics on Thursday from 4 till 6:30 p.m. Please come. Yeah.
Good work.
Yeah.
Well, so there it is. So the book, again, Gigs by Mark Mosedale, Si Smith. Obviously, you can get it online in various places, but far, far better to go buy it from local comic book shops. So OK Comics has been mentioned a number of times. So, and where are they located, if anybody doesn't know? They haven't never been there.
Thornton's Arcade, just off Briggate, near where Ann Summers used to be. If anyone knows that.
Everyone's going, oh, yeah.
And it's a great shop, so if you haven't been there, definitely go. So with that, we have a huge round of applause to Mark and Cy, and congratulations on the publication of Gigs.
You're listening to East Leeds